Hello everyone, this is American Contractor. Today's December 28th, 2019. Here's a headline for you right now. Rocket attacks kill U.S. contractor in strife-torn Iraq. This happened on Friday, I believe. And new rocket attacks in Iraq have killed a U.S. civilian contractor, raising fears on Saturday that violence could escalate in the protest hit country already engulfed in its worst political crisis in decades. Washington recently promised a firm response to a growing number of attacks on its interests in Iraq, for which no one has claimed responsibility, but which Washington blames a pro-Iranian factions. They don't know exactly which group or country did the attack. They're doing the investigation. The United States military is relying on the Iraqi government, the Iraqi military, Iraqi security forces to investigate and figure out who did it. So there might be a response in this. I don't know. There may be a response, military response from the United States, or there may not be. They're already decreasing the staffing of our American embassies in Iraq, and our civilians that are working in Iraq, they're decreasing those numbers, and most likely to be decreasing the military numbers also. Let's go ahead and read the rest of this article. U.S.-Iran tensions have soared since Washington pulled out a landmark nuclear agreement with Tehran last year and imposed crippling sanctions, leaving Baghdad, which is close to both countries, worried about being caught in the middle. In the latest attack, 30 rockets were fired at the K-1 Iraqi military base in Kirkuk, an oil-rich region north of Baghdad, at 22:20 GMT time Friday. A U.S. official told AFP in Washington, quote, one U.S. civilian contractor was killed and several U.S. service members and Iraqi personnel were wounded, unquote. The U.S.-led International Coalition Against Islamic State group said a direct hit on an ammunition depot caused secondary explosions, and 4 more rockets were found in their tubes in a truck at the launch point. A U.S. official told AFP on condition of anonymity. Federal security forces, Shia militia units, and Islamic State group sleeper cells all have a presence in volatile Kirkuk province, which is claimed by both Iraq's Kurdistan and federal authorities. Rockets and mortars. The attacks come at a time when Iraq is gripped by its biggest wave of anti-government street protests since the U.S.-led invasion of 2003 that toppled dictator Saddam Hussein. The protesters, many of whom were born in the post-Saddam era, have vented their anger at a government they consider inept, corrupt, and beholden to neighboring Iran. Violence has claimed nearly 460 lives, most of them protesters, and left some 25,000 people wounded, but the street rallies and sit-in protests have continued. The protests led to the resignation of the Iraqi government nearly a month ago, and Iran and its allies in Iraq have been pushing to place one of their men in the post of prime minister, sparking more popular outrage. The president is now threatening to quit in the face of this pressure. During the period of wider political chaos, the country has been a rise of rocket and more attacks against Iraqi bases housing U.S. soldiers and against American diplomatic missions. 10 attacks since October 28th have left several Iraqi military personnel wounded and 1 dead and caused damage to the area around the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad's ultra-secure green zone. 5 rockets hit El Asad Air Base on December 3rd, just 4 days after U.S. Vice President Mike Pence visited troops there, and more than a dozen rockets hit the Qayyara Air Base in northern Iraq in November. In Friday's attack, a Kirkuk provincial security official told AFP, quote, the shots were very accurate. The attack was aimed precisely at the area where the Americans are located near the meeting room. The rockets also could have been much more deadly had it not been for recent poor weather that has led to delays in its anti-IS operations and the postponement of a meeting scheduled for Friday on these missions, according to the Iraqi police. A U.S. source has said that pro-Iran factions in Iraq are now considered a more significant threat to American soldiers than ISIS. We read that again. A U.S. source has said that pro-Iran factions in Iraq are now considered a more significant threat to American soldiers than the Islamic State. The threat that saw Washington deploy thousands of troops to the country to assist Baghdad in countering the jihadists' sweeping 2014 offensive. Reflecting this concern, quote, a convoy of 15 American vehicles, each carrying armor and weapons, recently arrived at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, according to an Iraqi security official. Military U.S. diplomat and military sources have told AFP of their growing frustration with such attacks. They say they are relying on their Iraqi partners to play a deconflicting role between American forces and the Hashad al-Shabi, an umbrella organization for paramilitary groups largely made up of Iran-backed Shia militias. This is a complicated task, as the Hashad has been ordered to interrogate with the regular security forces, but many of its fighters continue to operate with a degree of independence. The Iraqi army integrated the Iran militia into the Iraqi army, so you have a lot of them soldiers within the Iraqi army that are still hold allegiance to the Iranian government or the Iranian, generals and hierarchy, that they're not going to listen to the orders of the Iraqi army. So they beefed up the American embassy, according to this article, by sending a convoy, 15 American vehicles to carry armor and weapons, recently arrived at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. So they're upgrading their force protection. Now we'll see what happens the next few days today, and we'll just see what happens. But sorry about this U.S. contractor getting killed. And hope they don't come under any more attacks, and I hope they find out who did this, and hopefully have a good military response. We'll see. This is the American Contractor. If you like the video, just go ahead and give me a thumbs up, make a comment below, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like I said, I'm trying to revive the channel up and running, and thank you for watching.